Okay, so what if there's a way to create a light mode and a dark mode without creating physical frames for each and every variation? And also, why is that important? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it, and we are going to use Figma's local variables to create a light mode and to create a dark mode. Now, the other question I asked is, why is this important? Well, it's important because if you go and create a light mode and a dark mode for each and every single frame, you're going to end up with a lot of frames that you need to manage. Whereas this solution that I'm going to show you in the video is not only going to save you time, but it's also a best industry standard practice to make sure that you can manage your design after the fact. And for those that's been following me for a while, you would know that I always say you want to create something that is lean, especially with development, but as well with design. It's all about managing it. It's all about managing it to perfection. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. And by the way, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. I do post videos like this on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And with that, let's get into it. Okay, so as mentioned in the intro of this video, this specific video is based on a larger video where we created an all-in-one flight app. And this is basically what you're seeing on the screen right now. In that video, we created the search functionality as well as the ticket, and we kind of went into much detail. So make sure to check out that video before jumping into this one, because this video is all based on that video. Okay, so first things first, what we want to do is we want to create the ability to have a light and a dark version. So I went and created a few wireframes. So when I go to the wireframe itself and we have a peek at it, I created a settings page wireframe. And essentially the whole idea is when the user clicks on the account or settings tab at the bottom of the menu, it will navigate them to this specific wireframe. So just kind of having a quick look, it's a very generic, very general kind of wireframe or page that takes the user to their account settings. So let's make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. And a few things. First off, we have personal information, payment methods, login and security. So I'm thinking this is going to be the heading, and having a heading that just says general might be a great idea. The next part is preferences, and this part is notifications, trips, and currency. And last but not least, having a section where we can have a light mode and a dark mode. You'll notice that I have a little switch, a little on and off switch, and that is essentially where we are going to set the light versus dark mode. Now, one thing before we jump into this, just a quick thing. When normally or usually creating a light or a dark version, a lot of times people create multiple screens for the dark version and for the light version. Now, if you have an app that only has a few pages, 5 or 10 pages, that's fine. You can physically duplicate the artboard, and you can literally do it this way by holding in Alt. So if I select search and I hold in Alt and drag it over here, I can go and start changing the main colors of this and basically create a dark version. Now with that, it's okay. I mean, you can get away with doing that. But once you start designing a 500 to 1,000 page mobile app, that can be quite tedious because every single page or every single frame you have, you need to have a light version and a dark version. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to only have one frame, but have a light version and a dark version. And the way that we're going to do that is using the local variable function in Figma itself. So it's a little bit more advanced, but stick with me here. I'll show you step by step how to properly create this. And by the way, we also, at the end of this video, we are going to create a prototype. So we are going to use the prototype feature in Figma to kind of put everything together. Okay, so quick thing, drop in the comments below if you've ever been in that situation where you had multiple designs or multiple frames and had to create a dark or a light version. Let's jump into this. The first thing we need to do when we look at the search frame and the ticket frame, and by the way, we created this in the previous video, we basically just put everything together. We didn't really focus on different colors, and we didn't really focus on assets or components. So let's start by putting that together first. Now, when I click on the search frame, on the right-hand side here at the bottom, you're going to see selection colors. Now it's going to show primary because in the previous video, this specific color, this orange color, we created a primary, which is kind of the first step into creating multiple local variables. But you'll notice that we also have a bunch of other colors. So we first need to conform this and basically group this together before moving on with anything else. So what I'm going to do is hover over the FFFFFFFF, which is white. And I want it to basically show me, okay, what are the elements that use it? So when I hover over that specific little kind of crosshair arrow thing, it's showing 22 is using this color. So when I click on that, it will show me, okay, this is what is using that color, which is good. When we do a dark mode, obviously we want this that is using that color to kind of switch to the dark color. So that's what we're going to do now. So selecting search, we will have a look at this triple F thing again, and we will click on these little dots and we will go and create a library item for this. And what I'm going to do is make sure that it is in collection 1, but better yet, maybe I don't want it in collection 1. Let's see if we can change that so it's a little bit more custom. So to change that, we're going to click on local variables where it says collection 1. I am going to rename it. I'm just going to call it mobile app for now. We can always change it later on. I'm going to close this down and let's go back to the search and click on this triple F. And we're going to go and create a new variable for this. So I am going to call it white for now. We might change it actually later on just so that it makes a little bit more sense. But now when I click on search, you will see that all those triple Fs changed to white. So that's kind of a good step forward. Let's kind of do the same for ticket as well. When I click on the ticket frame and we go back to the selection colors, it's got about 6 items that's using that. So now I can literally click on these dots and we're going to change it to that variable right there. So now both frames have that variable selected, which is good. So if we want to go and change that variable, we can easily do that. And we can do it right here where we can go and change it, and you'll see it will change the entire app. It will change everywhere where it was kind of tagged, right? So if I move this down to dark, you can see that, okay, cool. Yeah, that's working. That's the way to do it. But obviously I don't want to do it this way. So let's kind of reset that and reset the white. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the rest of them. So clicking on search, the next one I want to change is the F1. So going to F1, clicking on it, and I am going to call this light. And just having a quick look, if I hover over the crosshairs, it's about 6 items that's using it within this frame. So when I click on it, it should be able to show us that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it looks like it's not really showing us that, or it could be that the main artboard or the main frame is using that background color, and that's most likely why it's doing that. Okay, so we have white, we have light, we also have primary, but I want to double check and make sure that everywhere where we are using primary is basically using that tag. So here we can see it is using primary. Let's see this one, that one is using it, and this one is not using primary. So there we go, we have to tag it, and I'm going to do it that way by clicking on that variable we created, and it will use it. Let's have a look at this line here at the bottom. Same thing. It's not using a primary color, so I'm going to go and assign that. And let's look at this one as well. Let's see if it actually uses our, no, it does not. So we're going to set that to primary as well. Okay, so now that we've kind of have the easy part out of the way, let's have a look at the other colors. So we do have absolute black, which I know because obviously I designed this. I never use absolute black, and there is a reason for that. And the main reason is just because black sometimes just doesn't look good overall. So I want to see which element is using, or elements are using this black, and I can see the search flight is using it and the ones at the bottom is using it. So I am not going to do it this way. I am actually going to go back to search, click on it, and I'm going to reuse this color right here, which is 414A5A. And we are going to copy this and we're going to replace those items with that color. And I want to see how it looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. The change is very minimal, but it still looks relatively good. So in this case, when we go and highlight or select search frame again, you're going to see that black is gone. We only have this 41A5A color that we selected. So with that said, I just want to check if ticket has the same problem. I don't think so. Oh, we actually do. And when I hover over the crosshairs, it's not showing me anything. Oh, it's the QR code that's following that color constraint or the color variable. So I'm going to change that to our new kind of 4-1 color. And so when I hover or click on the ticket frame, we can see that it doesn't have that all black kind of 000 effect anymore, which is good. One step ahead. Okay, so the next step is we want to click on search, and that 414A color, we want to go and add a variable to it. And we can see we have 59 items that is using that color. So it's quite a significant amount. Let's go to libraries and create a new one. And I'm going to call this one dark. And so now everything is assigned, all those 69 elements within this frame is assigned to that dark. Let's do the same for this one. We have about 21 of them that is using this color. And so I want it to use dark. Okay, perfect. So we've already kind of got to the point now where we are using light, we're using white, and we are using dark and primary. So the next step is kind of all the colors in between. Let's have a look at this D9 and let's see, there's 4 elements that's using this, and that is specifically my checkboxes. So I want to obviously do the same for this. We also want to assign a specific variable, a local variable to this specific color. Oh, so by the way, there is a difference between local variables and variables in general. Drop in the comments below if you want me to create a video that basically distinguishes the two, because they are quite significant. So taking that D9, let's go and add a variable to it. Now, because only my boxes is using this color, might even just name it boxes or checkboxes, because in this design or in this frame, I can see that I'm not using that specific color, but I'm only using it in this design, in this frame, and specifically for the boxes. So we are going to go and create a library variable. Let's call it checkbox. Okay, so now we created that checkbox color. Let's have a look and see what is still left. So we have dark, white, light, and we still have quite a few. So it says see all 5 colors. Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's good. And now we have a few kind of, I call it dangling colors that is in between. Now, when you design a mobile app or a website or anything like that, you want to make sure that you limit the amount of different types of colors you're using. So for example, we already have dark, but now we have 1C, 1B, and we have 4, 8, 4, 5, 5 as well. So I want to pinpoint why I'm using this colors. There might be a specific reason, or it could just be a case of we can use different colors when we created the mobile app in the previous video. So let's just go and select it. And right there is a great example of what I mean. When you look at this arrow, I mean, it looks exactly the same as the dark or very, very similar to it. So again, I am going to assign the dark to this as well. Now we basically just scratching off all those extra dangling colors. We have another one here, and this one looks like it's also just one element. Let's see where that specific element is. It's right there at the top. It's showing it in the menu as well. So same thing for this. We do want to use dark when we work with that. So essentially, housekeeping here. We're cleaning everything up with that, and with all of that, we are getting to a point where we have a bunch of variables, or local variables for that matter. So we do have one orange color here that is also dangling, and that is the line right there. So same thing, we also want to assign primary with that as well. So now when I select the search frame, I can see that all my colors except for my image effect, which is a linear gradient, which I'm just going to leave as is. The rest is all using our local variable color. So when I look at the local variables, I can see I have white, light, dark, checkbox. Good. We're at a good step. All right, so let's do the next one, the ticket. And when I look at it, we still have a few, as I call it, dangling colors. And so the first one I want to target is the light one. And we do have about 3 items using that. And we already have a light color that we created in our local variable. So I'm just going to assign that one. The next one is an interesting one. It's 8B95, A6. Let's see which one is using this specific color. And I can see that it's basically those colors. And so when I designed this mobile app, I specifically wanted this two headings to have a different type of color. I know that only these 2 headings are using it. Let's go and create a variable for this. And I'm going to call it airport heading. Perfect. So now that is created as a local variable. Okay, so selecting ticket again, let's have a look at those dangling colors. I'm just gonna kind of expand it a little bit. We do have a linear here, but that's most likely because of the background image right here. So when I select that, it should select that. Yeah, it does, which is good. So we can leave that one alone. That's not going to affect our entire process of creating a light or dark version. But let's have a look at these other dangling colors. So we do have another one that's using that 4-8. And let's see which one that is. And again, it's that menu. So we're just going to go and select dark for that one. Select ticket again, and let's see the other ones as well. So we do have a red here. I'm not using red at all. So that would be quite interesting to see. Oh, it's the Air Canada logo, of course. Okay, this one, we definitely want to create one as well. So I'm gonna call it Air Canada. This specific color, we're not gonna change at all just because it is a kind of brand, right? So that's not really gonna change regardless if this is a light or a dark version. Selecting ticket, let's have a look at the last one that we have. We have E8. So let's see which one is using E8. Again, it is our QR code. That is definitely a different kind of gray. And I don't want that one to use our light because that might be a little too light. So let's have a look at actually how it would look like if we are using our light local variable. And I just feel like that's too light. So I'm going to undo it. Let's create another local variable. And we're going to call this one QR code. What we just accomplished is we created a bunch of local variables that all of our frames, or 2 frames for that matter, is using. So now manipulating colors is going to be quite easy to do. So when I select local variables, just to show you an example, I can literally go and change light year, and it's going to change it throughout the entire design, which is exactly what we want when we start messing about with light or dark versions. Okay, so with that all said, in the next chapter, we are going to build out the next wireframe, which is the in-page settings. And after that, once we're done with it, I'm going to show you how to properly connect that so we can start playing around with that light and dark version. So make sure to stick around. Okay, welcome back to chapter 2. We are going to start by creating that specific settings page frame. So have a quick look at the wireframe here. I'm just going to quickly have a peek. So first things first, we do have this area right here. So the idea that I had here is having a heading here that's going to explain that you are in the page settings, and right below we have the profile or the profile settings. So let's start off. I am going to take this wireframe, I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to put it right next to where we are physically going to put everything together. It just saves a lot of time. And once I'm done with this, I can just delete it because we do have it in the wireframe page. Okay, so first things first, we are going to take our frame tool and we will be selecting the iPhone 15 as per usual. And now we're going to start obviously putting everything together. So I'm going to call this the settings perfect. So we have that right there. The next thing I want to do is activate auto layout because we are using auto layout throughout the entire design. We're going to do that. The next thing is also adding the border radius. I normally like to add the border radius. It just kind of gives that good effect that we are looking for. And the other thing that I just want to double check is, that's right. So we do want to make sure that we are using fixed width and fixed height on the frame itself. By default, it looks like it does activate it that way. Now we're going to start adding that settings. First things first, I want to copy or reuse my menu at the bottom. And by the way, I am going to create a video where I'm going to show you how to physically create an asset and a component for stuff like your menu and menu items. It just really saves a lot of time if you do it that way. And the first thing I want to do is essentially copy this welcome back right here. So we're going to take it as is. I'm going to take that whole thing. We're going to drop it in here. And you're going to notice that it pushes it right at the top, which is fine. And it's doing that because we're using auto layout. Get rid of these boxes. We're not going to use the boxes at all, but we are going to use this heading and potentially also using the menu item on the right hand side. So with that said, now you're going to see how powerful that local variables are because we're just going to assign it. So where it's white, I am going to click on the left here. We're going to change that to dark. And the next thing I want to do is we do have a bleed here at the top or some padding. And the reason for that is because of the iPhone notch. So we do want to apply that to our settings page as well. And we do have 65. And when I look at this, it says 65, but here it says 82, which is fine. It says 25, and it's most likely the frame that has that 65. And that's right, the frame itself has that padding top of 65. So we're going to change this one to kind of follow suit. Next thing we want to do is essentially get rid of this profile picture. I just noticed that this little menu kind of icon we have also changed dark, which is not what I want. So we do want to change this back to white, but the inner icon itself, I do want to change that to dark. We do have it kind of looking like this. And I just realized that we probably want to change this to light so that the user can actually see that there is a menu item. So let's change that to light. And that looks good. The next thing we want to do is essentially create this heading. And to create that, we are going to zoom in here. We're going to see that we created a auto layout frame. And I want to essentially go and delete the secondary heading that we have. Also, I want to ungroup this because we don't need that auto layout anymore. We're going to change this welcome back, and I'm going to change it to settings. Whilst we change all this, I'm just going to hit the little play button because I want to see what I'm doing and how it's going to look like. So there is a few things that we do need to change. One thing I do want to do though, is I want to change this bold to semi-bold. And the next thing is the bleed on this side. I just want to double check and see if the bleed is what it's supposed to be. And when I click on what we used prior, I can see we used 25. So we do want to do that for this as well. So I want to select the row auto layout, and I can see that, okay, there is no padding set, but the frame by default comes with some padding. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to use padding on the frame itself. I would much rather want to use it on the row. And look at the previous video when I created this app. I show in detail and I explain why I'm doing that. So I'm going to change this to 25 so we can kind of conform to that left and right padding. Now we have settings and we do have our heading and we do have our menu item. The next step is essentially creating the profile kind of picture and the profile details. Again, we're going to go and copy this exactly as is, and we will drop it in here. And that's the beauty of designing this way, is you can reuse things and it just makes life so much easier. First things first, we do want to change this, rename it to profile. And with that said, I do want to change or add the padding on the left and right just so it conforms. The next thing I want to do is get rid of this beautiful navigation that we have, or this menu icon, because we're not going to use it. And the other thing I do want to do is basically take this and move it into there. But with that, also ungroup it because it's only one item now. We don't need it to be nested within an auto layout. Next, I'm going to change the horizontal layout. And now we're going to select that font and change it to dark. Now, one thing you're going to notice, because we changed font auto layout, we changed that to horizontal. It's basically putting everything in horizontal. So we got to fix this up. I'm going to take the profile and move it to the upper parent kind of auto layout group. And we're going to take this font and we're going to change the layout back to vertical, go back to profile, basically change this horizontal gap, change it to a number, and we're going to change it to 12. And so there's a few things that we do need to do here for this to kind of look good. And the first thing I want to do is basically change this because that text is way too big. I want to check and I want to see what kind of text would be kind of appropriate for this. And I feel like this number right here is most likely going to be the most appropriate. Let's have a look at this one. It's 26. I'm going to change it to 18. And I think we used semi-bold. So we're definitely going to use semi-bold on this as well. And that already looks much better. Now we got to change this to an email address. So I'm just going to say j@jcbcb.io. And we are going to change this to maybe say basic account. You know, that could be an area where the user can see what type of account they have within our app. One thing I do want to do though is add a little bit of spacing between these items. So kind of just increasing this space just a tiny bit, just so it's not as shrinked as it is. So looking at the design, that looks good. One thing I do want to do is kind of work on this spacing here on the right-hand side. But one thing I did notice is we did get rid of one of those kind of icons. I do want an icon on the right hand side. And the reason for that is because I do want the user to be able to go into their personal settings if they wanted to. So to do that, we're going to select this menu item that we have already, and it's called menu. So I'm going to copy that and we're going to drop it in here. And we're going to make sure that it is within profile, and we're going to drop it right there. I'm going to rename it, and I'm just going to say settings BTN. And now with that done, one thing we're going to need to do is take profile, take font. I'm going to group that together, activate auto layout. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to take profile. I'm going to change that gap to auto so that it pushes it right at the end. Now that it's done that, I just want to change this icon. So we're going to go and use the material symbol, and we're going to change this to arrow right. Now, one thing is I want to make sure that I'm selecting rounded, because I want that rounded effect on the arrow itself. And we're just going to click on it and it's going to move it in. But when you move it in though, it's not going to use our local variable. So we got to change the color. I'm going to change it to dark. And now we have that effect. But there's another thing though. I don't like this, that the settings menu icon and the arrow looks the same. So to get around that, I'm literally just going to ungroup this, and we're just going to use the arrow itself, nice and clean. Now, before we make any other types of changes, I do want to change this gap, and to change the gap in between, I'm going to group it together, activate auto layout, and you're going to notice, you're going to see later on why I've grouped this together. All right, so with that, we're going to change this to 48. I think we used 48 in the design or in the wireframe. I just want to make sure. Yeah, we used 48. So it's starting to look like something. It's starting to kind of come together. The next step now is I just quickly want to do some housekeeping. I just want to rename a couple of things here. So I'm going to select the frame that we just created, which is frame 46. And I'm going to call it top. And so we have the top, and we have another one, which is the menu. And you're going to notice that we have absolute activated. And that's the reason why we have that little square brackets, is because it's showing us that it is set to position absolute. Okay, next up, we want to create that line. Clicking on the rectangle tool, we're going to select the line tool. I'm just going to drag it onto the artboard itself. When you drag anything on the artboard or on the frame, it's not going to put it physically inside of the frame, which is fine. We just drag it in there, but it's going to put it right at the top. Obviously, it's not where we want it. We want it at the bottom. And now I am going to change that to light, and we're going to change the fix so it fills the content. And one thing I noticed though is that we have the line not stretching right to the edge. So it needs to adhere to that 25 kind of padding left and padding right. So let's go ahead and group together this line, obviously activate auto layout right there. And once we've done that, we're going to change this to 25, and it's going to give that padding of 25. And there we go. We have our line. Having a look at our design, that looks pretty good. Now we just got to work on our spacing. So to do our spacing, one thing I did do is when you look at these spacing items, it is 25 apart, which all of them or most of them is using 25, which is good. So we can definitely go and group this top part and this part. We can group that together. We can add auto layout, and we are going to change the gap of 10 to 25, and that's going to move our little line down. Now, with that said, I'm going to rename this one or this frame to main. And when we open up main, we'll have all our items within. And that's the thing about auto layout, is you need to play around with naming conventions to kind of figure out what works best for you. Next, we want to start adding these items right here. And to do that, we are going to reuse, again, of course, stuff that we've already created. So first things first, I do want to reuse most likely this heading, which we already did here at the top. So we're going to reuse that one. So I am going to basically copy this one right here. It's probably going to be much easier to do this one than doing the other one or duplicating or copying the other one. So we're going to select our settings. We're going to drop it in right here. And one thing I do want to do is rename this, and we're going to call it settings, of course. And we are going to add that padding in the left and right. So giving it a little 25. And now we do want to make sure that it is within main, because main's gap is set to 25. So I'm going to move this in to main right there, and it's going to move that where we want it. Next, we want to change this to perhaps preferences or settings. We already have settings, so settings is not going to work. So I do want to say account. Let's change this one to account. And one thing I do want to do is take this view all. I feel like we don't need that. So we're just going to get rid of it. But before we get rid of that, I'm going to duplicate this whole thing. I'm going to show you why I'm doing that. Okay, so we're going to take that view all. I'm going to take that and we're going to get rid of it. Now it's going to move everything to the middle, which is fine. We're just going to change this back to 10 and we'll move that to the left. One thing I want to make sure is the color variables. So our color variables is still set to dark, which is good. So we are on a good spot. Next, we want to start creating this personal information, payment methods, and login security. So to save time, I'm literally just going to copy the actual personal information. We're going to use this, drop it in, and you're going to see that it already conforms. It already copied exactly the font size that I want, which is 14. And this one right here, I do want to get rid of that view all and also ungroup that specific item. I also want to make sure that these icons are consistent because I can see that they are not. I am going to use this specific arrow throughout everything because we've already been using this arrow in our previous design. So we're going to take this one and replace the other one. So selecting this one that we dropped in, I'm just going to drop it in here and we are going to get rid of that one. It's all about conformity. A good design when it comes to app development or even web design or web development, it's all about conformity and making sure everything is basically conformed. Okay, so we do have a few basic things here. The next step is we want to create this line effect. And essentially, I'm going to take this line that we have and we're just going to duplicate it. And once I've duplicated it, I want to move it to exactly where I want it. So I'm going to take this line tool and we're going to drag it into our settings area right here. So I'm going to drag it right there and it is going to mess everything up. The reason for that is because we want to take these two items, group it together, and we want to make sure that we set it that way, which is horizontal. I want to make sure we set it to auto and center it. And then with that done, we want to take the settings and change the auto. I want to change the auto to 12. And next, I want to change the orientation to vertical. So that's already looking a little bit better. I want to make sure that this arrow right here is kind of stretched to the end. So the reason why it's doing that is because when we look at frame 46, it has a width that is fixed. So we want to make sure that we fill that and that will push everything to the end. While I'm here, I'm also going to change the name for this one. I'm going to call it personal info. And if you've been following me on YouTube, you would know that I'm a big fan of renaming your groups and your layers. And the reason for that is just because of housekeeping. It's going to make life so much easier once this thing turns into 20, 50, 100 different frames. Okay, one thing I do want to change is this. I want to say account items because this will be physically the account items. Okay, so now we're getting closer. There's still quite a few things that we do need to clean up. One of the things is when I click on this, it needs to be 25. Let's see if it is 25. It is 25, which is good. But with that said, we just want to keep an eye on our alignments for sure. Next, I want to take this line tool. We do want to change it to dash. I'm going to go ahead and change it to dash. Just have a quick preview and see how that looks like. And one thing I do want to say though is I feel like I'm struggling to see it. So we do want to kind of fix that up a little bit. When I look at this dash that I created right here, which I copied from this part right here, by the way, so it's part of the previous video. I just want to see what we did. We have 2.78, which I feel like this one is probably also 2.78. Let's have a quick look. It's not, it's 2. So let's change this to 3. And once we change it to 3, let's see how that looks like. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so with that, the next thing is we want to take this personal info and make sure that we basically click or select account items and just duplicate it. And we're going to duplicate it 3 times so that we can reuse it. Now, one thing though is we want to take these items, we want to regroup it into another auto layout. And I do want to change the gap of 25 to 12 just so it looks better. Just want to see how that looks like. So it already looks quite good. We just need to go and rename it. And again, I am going to literally just click on this and drop it in right there. Same with login and security, drop it in right there. Now, one thing we do need to do is we do need to add a couple of icons here. And I do want to make sure that we are selecting dark. So that's another thing is we want to make sure that we are selecting the right variable. So I want to make sure that I am using dark. Okay, so with that done, the next step now is we just quickly want to add a couple of icons here. So just have a quick look. We are getting to a point where it's starting to look like a settings page, looks okay. We just need to start adding those icons. So clicking on personal information, I want to make sure I am within this specific auto layout group. And we're going to go to our material icons. And the first thing I want is a basically account. So we can go and search for an account. I want to go for rounded and I want to go for a full that's on. So let's go. I think we used that specific icon already. I just want to make sure. Yeah, so we used it in account. So we don't want to reuse it. Maybe create or select a different icon that might also work for our kind of benefit here. And the one I want to go for, and I'm very picky when it comes to icons, let's go for this one. Let's just select that one and we will be using that. And then the next one we want to do is payment method. So essentially I just clicked on the frame itself and we are going to add payment methods. If you don't deselect the icon that you already added, it will override it. So it's super important to do so. Let's have a peek at a payment method type icon that we can use. And I am just going to go for this one right at the top. I do like this one. I want to make sure that both icons width is consistent. That's super important. Otherwise, your design is just not going to look good. And the next one I'm going to do is security. So let's just search for security and see what we get. I do like this one right here. See, that's what I meant when you have your previous icon selected, you will override it. So I just want to undo what we just did. And we will go and just select anywhere on the artboard and it will go and add another one for you. Okay, so we have 3 icons here. I'm going to take these icons and we're going to drop it in there. So I'm literally going to select, we're going to hit cut and we're going to drop it in right there. But one thing that we do need to do is we need to regroup these items again and activate auto layout. And once we've done that, we do want to swap these 2 around. And I want to change the gap within this. I want to change the auto to not 103, but 12 itself. Okay, so let's just have a quick peek and see how that looks like. I feel like the icon is a little too big, so we're just going to take the icon right here. And we're just going to bring it down a bit, around about there. And we are going to select dark itself. Okay, let's just have a quick peek and see how that looks like. Just want to make sure about one thing here. Just want to make sure that everything kind of looks good. It is horizontally aligned. So going back to our design prototype, it looks pretty good. Okay, next we're going to do the other one. So we're going to do this icon right here. So we're going to cut it, go to payment methods, paste it in, take these 2, group it together, auto layout, change the auto to not 107, but 12. Okay, so once we've added our gap of 12, we're just going to swap these 2 around. So that's like that. And last but not least, we want to change this icon color. So change it to dark. And I just want to double check what was the width and height that we set for these icons. It's going to be 20. So going back to that icon right there and changing it to 20. Okay, so if there's anything that doesn't make sense, because I'm going through this quite quickly, drop in the comments below. I do follow up and I do respond. If you have any questions, make sure to do so. Okay, last one, we're going to take this icon. We're going to drop that in right there. We're going to take these 2 and we're going to group it together, activate auto layout. I'm going to change the auto. We're going to change that to 12. Open that up. I'm just going to select login and just move it to the bottom. And there we go. Change this. I want to make sure we select the right one. Change that to 20. And the last step is we want to change it to dark. Now, let's have a quick look and see how that looks like. That looks pretty good. That looks nicely spaced out. One thing that is bugging me though is the line color. So we'll definitely look at that later on to make sure that it pops a little bit more, and might also play around with the spacing. So we'll definitely do that later on. Okay, next step is we want to create this area right here. So this is the beauty of it though, is we are going to take essentially this whole settings and this frame 64. So I'm just going to call it settings items right there. And we just want to group it together again and activate auto layout. And I'm just going to call it basically setting container. Perfect. So now with that done, we can go and duplicate this whole thing. One thing I do want to make sure is of our spacing. Our spacing is 25. We are still using 25, which is good. And the next one, I want to change this to preferences. So let's go and change this account to preferences. Perfect. So now that we've changed to preferences, we do want to change up these items right here. So this one is going to be notifications. The next one is going to be trips. And the last one is going to be currency. Okay, perfect. So now that we've added those items, let's have a quick peek and see how that looks like. That looks good. Now with that done, we just need to go and add the icons. So this is the beauty of using material design. We don't need to go through all those extra steps. We can just make sure that we select the icon and we can change it up. So I'm going to go for notification. I want to make sure that I go for a bell because that's something that people are used to. And so I'm just going to go and search for the bell right here. So I'm going to select that one and let's just drop it in. We dropped it in. We want to make sure that it is using dark. Okay, next one is trip. So I'm going to go for a pin. Pin might be a good spot here or a good icon to use. We're going to change that one to dark as well. And the last one is currency. So most likely if I type in currency or search for currency, I'm not really going to find anything that's good. I am actually going to use this one, but I don't want it to be filled. I'm going to turn off filled. And there we go. We do have a currency and change that one to dark. Have a quick peek at that. That looks good. We definitely still need to fine tune the spacing for sure because it's definitely bugging me. Kind of feels a little tight, but we'll still work on that. Okay, next up, we want to change or create this dark light mode part. So I am going to take all of this we just created. Just going to close this icon plugin that we're using, take this settings container, duplicate it, and we're going to call it general. Okay, with general added, we're going to take notifications, change this to light or dark mode. The next one is going to be booking sites. So we want to change trips to booking sites. And the last one is hotel chains. I'm just literally going to copy it. It saves a lot of time. Now notice a couple of things though, is we have a situation where the wireframe is already at the bottom. So it's stretching everything out. Whereas we are using the same kind of spacing and padding, but we are still kind of right here at the top. So it kind of makes sense why I feel like everything is a little tight. So let's go and modify our spacing just a little bit. So I'm going to select the count as well as preferences and general, just have a quick look. So we are using 25. I don't want to change 25, but what I do want to do is I want to change this 12 and maybe change that to 18. And let's just see how that looks like. That already looks much better. I think I'm actually going to go for 20. Let's see how 20 looks like. That I feel like is a little too much. When I look at these right here, I've noticed that one thing for sure is that our spacing there is 20, but right above it, it's not. So let's go back and change this to 15. And going into this auto layout right here and select each and every item, we're going to change them to 15 as well. Just see how that looks like. That already looks much better. So let's go and apply that to the rest of them as well. So I'm going to select that right there, change it to 15 and do the same for every item within. We're going to change it to 15. And the last one right here, also change this to 15. Select each box or each item. And we're going to change that to 15 as well. So now with that done, it looks much better. We have a lot more space to kind of play around with, which is good. So we do have a bunch of space here at the bottom. So we either can do two things. We can either create something extra, we can add some icons, we can add some items to fill that gap, or we can leave it as is. So before we make that decision, let's go and change these icons first. So light and dark mode, we are going to change this icon right here, go to material symbols, and we are going to search for, I don't think dark is going to give us an, okay, that looks good. I'm going to set it to that one. I really like that one. I'm going to set this to dark. Booking sites, let's see what we can come up with here. So I'm just going to say booking, nothing. Okay, let's go for maybe a kind of something like this. And last one, let's see what happens if we search for hotel. I don't think we're going to find anything good. Let's see. I'm going to turn on full for this one. Let's see how that looks. No, that does not look good. I don't like that. Let's see how that one looks like. That looks good. Let's maybe turn it off. There we go. That looks pretty good. I like that. I'm going to, of course, change this to dark. Just want to make sure, did I change this one? No, I did not. And we want to make sure we change that to dark as well. The same with this one right here. I can see that we did not do that because we copied it over, but there we go. Okay, having a quick look. That looks pretty good. That looks exactly kind of what I wanted. One thing I do want to check though is I want to see how it look like if we change the 25 to 35. So let's have a peek at that and see how that will look like. So changing and selecting our main container. I'm just going to remove this right here because we're not using that anymore. And one thing I do want to do is not physically change this space here. I do want to change this space over there. So let's see how I can do that. So selecting main, and we can change this 25 to 35 and see how that looks like. Going back to the design, that right there looks pretty good. And you know what? Looking at this right here, I don't think I'm going to add anything extra. I feel like this is pretty clean and pretty good to go. Okay, so there we go. This chapter, we created this page from the bottom up. In the next chapter, we are going to create our checkbox. So this light or dark mode, we're going to change this arrow. We're going to change it to a working checkbox that can go on and off. And this checkbox is going to be part of how we're going to set the light and dark of this entire app. So when I zoom out, I'm going to look at this entire app. It needs to essentially set that. And that is exactly what that is going to do coming up. All right, welcome to chapter 3. Chapter 3, we are creating that beautiful switch for our light or dark mode. So something very similar to what I created in the wireframe. And essentially the whole idea is when we click on it, it needs to move to the right. And it also needs to do a couple of things in the back end with our local variables. So let's go and create this checkbox. Now, the first thing we want to do is take a frame and we're just going to drag it onto the artboard. And there's a specific reason why I'm doing it this way, but I'm going to take this frame and we're just going to drop it right here for now and rename this. And I'm going to call it checkbox and switch because it's technically a switch. It's not a checkbox. All right. So with that done, I am going to go back to this one because I really like the width and height that I did here, but I'm also going to show you how to do this from scratch. So the width and height that we have 47 and 25. Our icon or our little circular dot in the middle is 19 by 19. You'll also notice that I used an auto layout for this. So let's go and recreate this. First thing first, we are going to take the circular or the ellipse tool. I'm going to drop it in. And we are going to change this to 19 for now. With that, we are going to group it. With that group, we're going to say auto layout. I'm going to rename this group. We're going to call it switch. Perfect. And now we can start adding that padding. So just a couple of things. I do want to double check. We did use 19. And when we look at the auto layout, we are using 3, and a fixed of 47. So let's go and change that and set that. So first things first, we can change this hug to fix, change that to 47. And let's just activate a full. And the full that I want to use is light. One thing as well is I want to add 3 and 3. There we go. Now it kind of looks like a switch. The next step is we do want to change our border radius to 500. The reason I'm using 500 is because that will literally make it a pull shape, exactly what we have there. Okay, so that looks good. One thing though is we do want to change this to our white variable, and let's see how this looks like in the demo as well. So I'm just going to move my arrows until I can get to it. There it is. It looks okay. Actually, one thing I do want to do is change this light. We can use the same color as the checkbox color, which we basically put together in the local variables. We'll just give that extra little darkness that we might need. Okay, so again, going for a very simplistic kind of flat UI design here. Now that we've done this, we are essentially going to create the functionality so that I can move left to right when clicking on it, because when I look at it now, it doesn't do anything when you click on it, so it's not great. So we want to definitely go and create that functionality. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we are going to create a component of this. And you'll see that it changed it to a purple color, which means that it is a component now. Now that it's a component, when we go to assets and we go and have a look at the assets, you're going to see that we have the switch there, which is good. Going back to it, now we got to create that variation. So to create the variation at properties, we are going to click the little plus and we're going to create a variation. And when you do that, we are going to go and click the little plus to create that extra variation. Now that we've done that, the next step is we want to rename this. So I'm gonna go and change this to switch on here on the right-hand side of the screen. And this one, it says multi-edit for variants. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good. That's a new feature of Figma, by the way. I'm just gonna rename this default. We're gonna call it switch off, and perfect. So we have switch off and we have switch on. So with switch on, one thing I do want to do is I want to change the alignment so that that button or that little circular thing goes to the right hand side. We want to change this fill. We're going to change that to primary. And so there we go. We have our off and we have our on. But again, it's not doing anything at this stage. It's just literally showing us off and on. So the next steps is we actually need to go and create the prototype kind of effect for this to do anything. Okay, so to do that, we're going to click on our switch off in prototype mode, and we're just going to hover over it. You're going to see a little circle there, and it's right there. We're going to take that and we're going to drag it to this one. And essentially now it's asking us, okay, do you want this to activate when clicking on it? I'm going to say yes. Basically what it's saying there, it's property one is going to move to switch on, which is good. But one thing I do want to do is change this instant, and I want to change it to smart animate. And the reason I want to change it to smart animate is because it kind of gives this cool effect when you do the smart animate. So that's good. Now we want to do the same for the switch on. So when you click on it again, it needs to go back to the previous state. So we're just going to drag it over to that one. I'm going to make sure smart animate is activated. So let's see how this looks like. So to test it, obviously you can't test it here. It's not going to do anything. But one thing we can do is go to the assets and we can drag this right here. And let's see if it does anything. And there we go. We have our beautiful looking switch. That looks actually really good. I like the animation as well. The animation isn't too slow. It's kind of just a perfect spot. So with that, we can just get rid of this right here. We don't need it. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping once again. So just making this a little bit smaller, kind of moving this to the beginning here, just kind of moving everything so that overall it's just nice and clean, because this design is going to become quite big. And by the way, I will be posting videos on my YouTube channel how we're going to expand this design from just 2 pages or 3 pages for that matter right now to quite a significant amount. We're going to build out an entire flight app from start to finish. So make sure to subscribe, because that's definitely going to benefit you as a designer. Okay. So now that we've created that, we are going to go and drop it in here. So let's move in right here. We're going to take this arrow. We're going to get out of prototype mode because we're still in prototype mode. I'm going to go into design. Let's go to the layers and let's have a peek here. Now we have our icon or our arrow there. We do have frame 46. So I'm just going to go ahead and rename this, and we'll rename it to item. And now that we've done that, we're going to go to assets and we're going to drop this in right here. Once we've dropped it in, I think it is good as it is, but obviously we want to get rid of that arrow. Okay, let's see how that all looks like. So let's navigate to our design that we just created. Now, one thing though is I do feel like it's a tiny bit too big. So we do want to make it a tiny bit smaller. The easiest way to do this is literally just do it right here. So we're going to take this guy right here, and I'm going to select the scale option on the left-hand side. That's in most cases the easiest way to kind of scale something. And where it says width and height, we're just going to make it a tiny bit smaller. So to about there should be good. Let's see how that looks like. I'm actually going to go a little bigger, maybe 49. And that looks good. I really like that. And so now we can test it. Now we can see if it's working. And it is working. It's working quite nicely. I really like that. Okay, so with that, we just created our switch on and our switch off. So we have that basic functionality right now. And we can always play around with it, kind of play around with the width and height just to kind of get it perfect. But at this stage, that looks pretty good. All right, so with the on and off switch done, the next chapter here is I'm going to show you how to put all of this together. So when you click on that switch, it needs to automatically change everything. So with that coming up, we're going to program this switch on, switch off button to do what it needs to do. Okay, welcome to the last chapter. This chapter, as I said before, we are going to code or configure our switch to do what it needs to do and essentially go from light mode to dark mode. So going back to it, I am just going to go ahead and zoom in here and just have a look at the switch. And this is essentially what we need to do. So first things first, we want to get rid of this wireframe. We don't need that anymore. It's just in the way and it's not beneficial. We still have that wireframe here on the wireframe page. And by the way, I have duplicated or added this entire design to the Figma community, and you can literally go and fork this and use and do whatever you want with this design. Okay, so making sure everything is nicely spaced, I'm just gonna move this checkbox to the top right there. Now we're gonna go and start playing around with this. First things first, we want to go and select our actual checkbox or our switch. And with that selected, let's start working with our local variables. So first things first, we want to click on local variables and just have a peek at what is going on here. So everything looks good. We have white, light, dark, all the good stuff that we already did in chapter 1. Now we are going to manipulate it. This can sometimes get tricky, so make sure to follow this. And by the way, if you have any questions or any issues you're running into, make sure to drop in the comments below and I'll definitely follow up. First thing, most important thing is we don't want to go and add the interaction items right here, but we much rather going to do it right here. The reason I'm saying that is because if you do it right here, A, it might not work, and B, if you only do it there and you want to reuse this button somewhere else or change your design, it's work that you need to redo. So with that all said, let's navigate to the switch and let's zoom in. So we do have, when we switch to our on, we do have a change to function here. And that is essentially part of our on click. Now, before we jump into this, I do already have a screenshot of colors that are already set so that this already looks good, a dark version for that matter. So with that, let's go and add that. So I'm going to just drop in a frame, and this is just a frame that we're gonna work off of to make sure that we are selecting the right colors. Okay, so I just dropped in a design. This is the same one, just the dark version, and this is gonna help us a lot. It's gonna save us a lot of time because we can essentially just reuse this. So the first thing we wanna do, go back to our switches and go back to prototype. And where it's having that change from the off to the on switch, we do want the set variable that we already created. We want to pick a variable and we're going to start with white. And it's essentially asking us, okay, good. What do we want white to be changed to? So I'm going to click on white right here, and we are going to go and select the white, which is going to be 242C40. So we're going to click on that, and then we're just going to close this down. So now when we click on or turn on the switch, it's going to change white to that specific color. Okay, so let's just have a quick peek. I just want to make sure that that's going to be the correct one, which I believe it is. The next one, we want to change the light. We want to change the light to a specific color. Okay, so before we start changing the light, one thing I like to do is essentially just create myself some custom color swatches that we can reuse. So I am just going to take a box or a rectangle tool, just drag it right here, and we are just going to change it to these colors. So this one is going to be our light version, and I'm just going to duplicate this, move it up, and we are going to select our light version. So we have light here, we have dark here, and that is it for now. We can always come back. I think I'm going to do the same for our checkboxes. I'm just going to have a quick peek here, and we're just going to select that one right there and just make it a tiny bit darker as well. And so we have our 3 color swatches here. Now this is definitely going to help us. We're going to go back to our switches, go back to prototype. And when we click on this one, now we want to go and add another set variable. So I'm going to go and add this variable, and I want to change light, and I want to change light. I think it's not going to work. I think I actually discovered a glitch of Figma, because when you try and change it this way, it's going to change the top one right there, which is obviously not what we want. So I'm just going to copy this, and on top of that, we're just going to undo what we just did. And that's the downside of Figma. And when you start using kind of custom variables, it's very finicky. It either works or it doesn't work. So we're just going to change that. And I'm going to go back to design, and might just going to do it this way while I copy the hex color. We got to go back into prototype, and we want to go to that light, and we want to change that right there. Okay, so let's go and test this. Let's see if it actually works. So when I turn this on, it's changing some of it, which is good. So when I move to the other kind of prototypes, it's already changing it. That is good. Not ideal yet, for sure. It's not 100% there yet. So one thing I do want to check though is what is the color that we used on the settings. I think we never changed a white to an actual variable color. So let's just change that to white and let's test it again. When I turn this on, it should, okay, we do need to reset it because we haven't changed the off version yet. So I'm going to click on the little play and let's navigate back to that. When we turn this on, it's starting to change things, which is good. That's exactly what we want to see. Okay, so with that done, the next part here is we need to go and add the next set of colors. So clicking on this, I'm going to go to prototype. We are going to open up this one right here, and we are going to set a new variable. The one that I do want to change is the checkbox, and the checkbox, I do want it similar to this color, but just a tiny bit darker, so we can set it right there. And with that done, now we are going to create and set another variable. And the one that I want to change next would probably be the QR code. So the QR code backdrop. So we are going to go again and drop this in right here. And with that dropped in, so what am I dropping in there? I'm just reusing the color that we already set, and I'm just playing around with the color so it's just a little lighter. With that all done, we're going to close this. We're still going to get back to it because there's still a lot to do, but I just want a reset methodology kind of added. And to do that, we are going to click on this arrow right here, and we are going to set those again. So white, we are going to set to white. So we're going to do just like that. Let's do the next one, set another variable, light. We're going to set that back to light, which is good. Checkboxes is the next one, I believe. Checkbox, we are going to set back to the color that it needs to be. I'm going to show you why I'm doing that. So going back to our design, now that we turn this off, it is actually going to reset all the colors. Turning it back on, it's going to set it back to that design. So we're already getting there. Like having a look at the checkboxes, we can see that we have our darker color there, which is pretty good. The next thing I feel like is we need to set dark to white or to a lighter color, and that will kind of really brighten up everything that we have over here. So going back to our prototype, clicking on this right here, we are going to set another variable, and we're going to set dark. And I do want to set dark to perhaps not white, but just kind of off to white. So about there. And let's see how that looks like. Obviously, we need to do the same so that we can reset it. So kind of set a variable again. We're going to set dark to go back to dark. So when we look at this now and we go to this and we turn this off, everything looks good again. And we turn it on again. There we go. We have our light mode and our dark mode. Now, one thing though, I do feel that this white color or this light color we just created to kind of transform dark into light is a little too bright for my taste. So going back to the original one that I created, you can see that this one is a lot kind of more smooth. It's a lot darker than just that pure white. So I just want to see what is the color that I went and created for this. So we can basically go and select it there. And I'm going to copy this whole thing. And let's go and change everything to that. So we're going to go back into prototype mode, click on this down arrow, and where we set dark, we're just going to open this guy up. We're going to drop that in there, and let's see how that looks like. So let's just turn off and on. And that already looks much better. It's not 100% there yet. I feel like we should maybe make it a tiny bit lighter. We are almost there. Overall, it looks pretty good, but not 100%. So going back to it, let's just go and make this a tiny bit brighter. So I'm just going to move it up to about there, and let's see how that looks like. So turning this on and off again, that's already looking way, way better. Not 100% there yet. I do want it a tiny bit lighter again. And as you've been following me on YouTube, or if you follow me on YouTube, you would know that I am very particular when it comes to how it needs to look like. Everything kind of needs to look perfect before we do anything. All right, turning this off and turning it on again. That looks good. I really like that. It really pops. And so now we essentially created the functionality that we are definitely looking for. So now we're going to fine tune everything, kind of tweak everything to kind of get where we want it to be. First things first is the navigation at the bottom. You're going to notice that the navigation is not really popping. So we want to make sure that that pops. And to do that, we are going to go to the navigation itself and go back to design, and it's set to white, but we are going to detach this and we are going to create a new one, and I'm going to call it navigation BG. And we are going to do the same for this one as well. So we do want to detach it and we want to attach navigation BG to that. Now that gives us the ability to kind of play around with the navigation color. So going back to our prototype and going back to our switching to prototype, we do want to add another variable. And the one that we want to modify, I'm just going to drag this up a bit. And the one that we do want to modify is navigation BG. And I do want it to be similar to the QR code. So just copying this color, pasting it in there. And once that's pasted, I do want it even a tiny bit darker than that. So maybe about here. Let's see how that looks like. Before we have a look at that, I do want to go and just set that we want to reset this once we go and change our switch again. Okay, so going back to it, switching on, switching off, and there we go. That already looks better. But again, when we look at it right here, it's not differentiating itself between the background and the actual menu itself. So we do need to still play around with that color. So going back to it, we are going to click on this right here. And let's go and make this even darker. So I'm going to move it to about there. And let's see how that looks like. So we do want to turn this on and off again. And let's see, that already looks much better. By the way, I am going to drop a video on the menu itself. I am going to create a video where we're going to have different variations of this menu. And this is going to be all part of us building out this entire app. Next step is we do need to fine tune a few things here and there. For example, when we look at the search flight, doesn't look good. When we look at this, it doesn't look good, and that needs to be white. So overall, there's a few small things that we do need to change. This page, same thing here at the top, we do want to change that up a little bit. Overall, the rest really looks pretty good. And the same with this, we do need to go and change these line colors so it kind of matches everything as well. So let's start with that search button. So scrolling in right here, I'm going to select that and go to the design. It's set to dark, and that's the reason why it's doing that. One thing I do want to do is kind of undo where I deleted this right here. I just want to see, we do have it set to a super dark as well. So we do definitely want to go and set that. One thing we're going to do right now is we're going to take search flight and we're going to take this color right here. And the quickest way of doing this is literally just go and detaching it. But one thing I do want to do is just make it a tiny bit darker. So I'm just going to move this down a tiny bit. So it's about there. And let's see how that looks like. And let's see how it looks like with that kind of turned on. That looks good. I like that. Perfect. But I am still going to create a variable for it. I'm going to call it primary button color. And now we can do the same for this one as well. We can basically set these two to that as well. So I'm going to detach that and we are going to set it to this one here. Going back to it, we do see that it looks pretty good. Now, this is a glitch when you see something like that. It's a glitch in Figma. We just got to give it a second, just go on and off again. But that already looks much better. We can see now that we have the dark where we want it to be, and overall it looks good. Next, I want to do these headings. I want to make sure those headings stay white. So to do that, we are going to select and make sure that we are selecting the two headers only and not our actual menu on the right hand side. So selecting these two right here, we are going to change this. So I'm going to create a new one here and we're going to call it heading color. And we are going to create a variable for that. So now we have heading color. Going to local variables, you can see that this thing is starting to grow. It's getting more kind of variables as we go along. The same for this now on the right hand side. I do want this right here. So make sure that we are selecting the correct ones. It's white right here. I'm just going to click on that and we're going to change that to our heading color. So going to our design, we can see now that we are getting closer. We're getting to a point now where it's starting to look really cool. Again, this whole thing, sometimes I feel like it's a little glitchy, but overall it should work just fine. So I'm just going to hit the play button again and let's just see what's going on here. It's going to move to that part again, turn it on, turn it off. Now it's working again. Good. So there we can see, good. Our heading is white. Everything kind of looks pretty good. Last thing I do want to do before we finish or wrap up this video is I do want to change these line colors or want to assign a specific line color to that. And the one I do want to do, so I'm going to click on it, go back to the design. It is set to light. So technically it should change it already. So I'm going to change this up. Let's change it to line color. I just added another local variable called line color. And let's go ahead and add that line color to the rest of our lines that we have here. So I'm just going to go and select this right here. And we will change this to our line color. And then we're going to go to this right here, go to prototype mode, and let's just add another variable. And the one that I do want to add is the one we just created, which is line color. And in the prototype itself, let's change it to this color here that we have for dark. We might need to play around with it a little bit. So I'm just going to drop that in there. And once I've dropped it in, let's see. Yeah, see, so that is way too bright. I'm just going to reset it. The button doesn't work anymore. So we just want to go and replay this button. And the reason why that's happening is it might be a glitch, but it's also partly because we are constantly changing the design. But once you are done with everything and you showcase this to, for example, a client or your boss or whomever that might be, it will definitely be more stable. I definitely want to decrease the color of that for sure. So one thing that we can do is let's just open this up a bit and let's go and just dial down the opacity and see how that looks like. Give it a second to apply. That already looks much better, but I'm even going to down it more. Let's down it to about 18%. And let's see how that looks like. That normally takes a second. There we go. That already looks 10 times better. It looks good. I like it. All right, so last thing before we wrap up this video, I do want to add a way for the user to go to account itself. And to do that, we do want to add it to the prototype. What we're going to do is we are going to, first things first, navigate to this part right here, click on account. We're going to go to design and we want to change this dark. I want to change this dark to primary and I want to change this opacity to 100%. With that now, it basically shows the user where they're at. So let's just have a look at how that looks like. In the dark mode, it looks really cool, but I just want to make sure how it looks like on the light mode. And we do want to replay this because the button is not working anymore. So I'm just going to hit the play button and get this to load up again. Yeah, that looks good. I really like that. And so we do want to now start messing about with this. All right, so first things first, I do want to change this to 60 as well so that it looks like we navigated to that part. So just looking at the design, that looks good. Next up is we need to link this up. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to prototype. We're going to select this account and we are going to drag it to this. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to navigate to this page when we click on that button. We're going to go for Smart Animate. I think that will look pretty cool. Let's see how that will look like. We might need to change it, but let's see how that looks like. So going back to the homepage, let's click on that. And that looks okay. I like it. Let's do the same for trips. So when you click on trips, I want it to go back to the homepage and Smart Animate. Everything looks good. Now we can basically navigate between them. That looks really cool. Okay. So one small thing though is when we click on account, I do want a different type of animation. I want it to kind of slide. So let's change that. Click on this right here and change the slide. And let's change it to move in. The move in that I want is exactly that one. And let's see how that looks like. So clicking that animation is too slow. So I want to change that to 100. And let's see how that would look like. So going back to this one right here, let's see. That looks cool. I like that. Okay. So the last thing is I'm not a huge fan of our color on account. I know I just did it, but let's go and change that up again. I do want to check what I did here and I have dark. So let's go and just change this. We're going to change that to dark just for a little bit more consistency. So when we look at the two, that is nice and consistent. By the way, you can do whatever you want because this whole design is on the Figma community. And with that, that is it. That is how you properly set up a light version and a dark version. So when we go to account and we turn this on, that looks pretty cool. So with that, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. I do post videos like this on a weekly, daily, and monthly basis. And with that, check you again.